Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Blake Bowman, and this is the second official episode of the Blake Bowman podcast. Today I have on Roop Sihota, who is a doctor of physical therapy working out of San Francisco Crossfit with Kelly Starrett and Mobility WOD. We talk about his journey and how he became a physical therapist. We get into some technical stuff today in regards to squatting and toes forward, but a lot of it is about Roop's personal mission to help others and how I can kind of relate to that, so I hope you enjoy it.
So I started at San Francisco CrossFit back around 2008. Before that, I was kind of your desk-bound, gym rat type of athlete. I worked for the DoD. I worked for the government and Silicon Valley companies for a few years. Just, was going through the grind, the rat race, as some people call it. Big-time gym rat. One day, somebody told me about CrossFit, so I decided to give it a shot. Didn't really care for the community that I had been or jumped into. And that was just my own personal bias. And so one day I just kind of searched around the other CrossFits that existed in San Francisco at the time and called a number on the other end. Kelly Starrett picked up, and it was kind of cool. At that time, Kelly was Kelly. He wasn't, beyond the little CrossFit community at that time. Mm-hmm. Mobility WOD didn't exist or anything like that. So I just talked to him about, hey, I want to jump into the CrossFit community or at least your gym and see what it's like. The schedule really doesn't fit my schedule. So I was being a little bit of a douchebag, and, he was very accommodating and said, hey, you know what, come on down, let's work out. My first workout was with Adrian Bosman, and I remember that workout very vividly. It was like 150 push-ups for time. Anytime you broke up, you had to go run a 400 meter, and I got to 100 after about 5 or 6 400 meter runs, and I was like, okay. And Adrian looked over at me, it's like, maybe you should just call it a day right there.
That's brutal, man.
It was brutal, but I fell in love right away. And I fell less in love with the CrossFit approach because I was always doing high-intensity type of workouts, but just the community environment for me was amazing. This was when we were in the parking lot, and within about 3 to 6 months of working out there, I just called up Kelly, and I was like, look, I want to start coaching. I just love what you guys do. I love the philosophy. I've always been a gym rat, and I like helping people. So I did that for a little bit, and then I got really addicted into everything. And at that point, Kelly had just passed his board exams. His second daughter was just born. And we just started talking a lot about helping people, fixing people. And so I made the decision with my wife, along with the support of my wife and the Starretts, and decided to go back to school to pursue my doctorate in physical therapy.
Wow, man.
That just happened to be the same exact time that Mobility WOD launched. So it was kind of a fluid transition of me being in a PT school, Mobility WOD launching, me graduating, and then flowing right into, at that point, the well-established Mobility WOD brand to start becoming a visible seminar instructor and just getting into the grind of everything.
That's awesome, man. I was going to actually ask you how you ended up at San Francisco CrossFit instead of like a clinic, medical, industrial area.
It worked out. The thing is my original plan going to PT school was to get the knowledge, right? Mm-hmm. I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and because of that, I went into PT school very focused. I think sometimes people think that I went into PT school very biased, but in my opinion, I went in very open and willing to learn everything. And the reason that is because everything we do at Mobility WOD is not just classic orthopedic. We're not just sports physical therapists, right? We work with every part of the human anatomy, physiology. And so I went into PT school really trying to get everything I could out of every class I took. Yeah. So neurosciences, your geriatrics, your bariatrics, your pediatrics, everything I could possibly take in, I tried to, but I had an idea of what I wanted to do. And from day one, it was, hey, you go to PT school, and Kelly said, when you come out, there'll be plenty of opportunities awaiting for you. And fortunately, while I was in PT school, I made the conscious decision of not quitting my job at San Francisco CrossFit. I was still here at 5 in the morning teaching clients. I'd go to school till 6 or 7 p.m., come back here and maybe teach another client 7 or 8 at night. And I always kept myself involved in the community because the evolution of Mobility WOD and the evolution of everything we've taught at San Francisco CrossFit, we have Carl Pally, Diane Fu, so at one point we had Adrian Bosman, the amount of knowledge that's gone through this place, it would be silly for me to just up and leave for 3 years while I'm in PT school and miss out on all those classic conversations. So it was just a seamless transition from that point into, hey, day one I got done with PT school, Kelly's like, all right, here we go, clients, here we go.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, so it's just like a natural transition for you. You're already there. You kind of just stayed there.
Yeah, and you know what? Honestly, there was a lot of stuff that I was doing before I graduated PT school that isn't like PT, but it's helping people move better. So I was just able to add more kind of granular level conversations into things with the knowledge that I gained throughout PT school. So it was a very seamless transition throughout.
That's awesome, man. And how long did it actually take you to go through PT school?
So PT school itself, this is an interesting part of everything. PT school itself, I'm not going to say it was easy by any means. It was hard as hell.
Yeah.
But it was 3 years dedicated. That included a lot of internship hours. The hardest part for me was the year before PT school. So the year before PT school, when I made the conscious decision to go, I didn't have all the prerequisites or the pre-requirements to even apply for PT school.
Yeah.
So while I lived in San Francisco, partially working at San Francisco CrossFit and working at another company down in the Silicon Valley, I also had to commute between San Jose, San Francisco, and 4 different locations. I went to UC Berkeley Extension in Redwood City. I went to De Anza Foothill College. I went to San Francisco State. I went to 4 different locations, and any given day, I would be bouncing around to 5 different spots. Commute down to San Jose to work for a little bit, then quickly hop over and take a side out 2-hour class for a biology class. Hop back to San Francisco so I could do some meetings online. Hop over to UC Berkeley for a couple classes, come to teach San Francisco CrossFit. Like in one day, that would be a normal trip.
Yeah, that's crazy,
that
man.
Year before PT school, when I can actually get the prerequisites to apply, was by far the most draining experience. Why? Because there was never a point where I was at home with my wife. Like I was just on the go nonstop. Once I got into PT school and they were like, hey, this is gonna be the hardest thing you have to do. And I was like, wait a minute. I have to be at one location for 3 years and focus really hard. I can do that. Like as long as I'm not bouncing around commuting everywhere to do different things, I can do this. It wasn't easy, but it was doable.
By contrast, that became easier than what you were doing before, that juggling act.
Easier is the right word. Not easy, but easy as far as, the ability to be like, oh, I have 6 classes, but I don't have to be at one place to learn all these classes. I'm good, dude. I'm good.
I was thinking about going back to school for PT as well. I have a business degree, actually.
Yep.
But I kind of ran into the same situation as you. I don't have all these prereqs. I need to take a year of classes before I could actually even enter into the PT program.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was just like kind of weighing all of my, options, and I ultimately decided not to. But
it's a tough decision to make.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 30 when I went back to PT school.
Okay.
So I was 28 when we made the decision. 29 when I started going back and doing all the PT requirements. Even when I applied for PT school and got the interview process, during the interview, I told them, hey, I have 2 more classes to fill. And they're like, wait a minute, you're applying for this and you haven't finished all your prereqs? They're like, we don't allow that. I was like, look, I told them my story and I was like, I'm committed to this. And I think they took me at, what I was saying and a committed individual because I told them the journey. But it was a difficult decision for myself and my wife to make because I'm giving up a pretty cushy Silicon Valley, nice paying, I don't have to work my ass off if I don't want to, excuse my language. I don't have to work my butt off if I don't want to. And I could just keep going through the grind and being another minion. And I could have been perfectly content with that and then travel the world doing whatever I wanted to with the money that we made. That, to me, I did not get the self-fulfillment that I was looking for when I was dealing directly with customers and dealing directly with people and seeing the changes I can make on people's faces that I was able to coaching CrossFit, improving people's movements. And so I just needed to make that life change. And fortunately enough for me, financially, it's been rewarding enough that I'm still able to live my life the way I want to without being some flashy, glamorous guy. I'm just your everyday run-of-the-mill guy who just wants to be able to take care of his wife and future kid and just be able to travel a little bit, but more importantly, wants to help people get better and feel better.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I have a very similar perspective on things. I call that double compensation, right? Like people that help other people for a living receive financial compensation, and it's like, you can call it like a spiritual fulfillment compensation as well.
I think, and a lot of people say this. I've read this in so many books that if you do something you love, it's not really work, and if you do it, money will come eventually. And to some extent, I believe in that. First off, if you do what you love, it's still damn work. Like you still have to put. You're exhausted. You're grinding. You just enjoy it a little more. You're willing to do it more because you are. You see that end result.
I think that's the caveat to that, right? Like
Absolutely.
A lot of people don't necessarily see that before they enter the industry or whatever it is they're doing.
I will always say I've been very, very, very fortunate enough to have been involved with San Francisco CrossFit at the most ideal opportune time.
Yeah.
You come into San Francisco CrossFit now, and maybe you'll get you'll get to say hi with Kelly. You get to take a picture with him, and he'll chat with you for a little bit. But to be able to be there during his Diane Foos, Carl Powley, some of our amazing coaches' evolution and thinking, and and just the growth of them, to be a part of that, I've been very, very fortunate, which has made the grind that much better for me.
Yeah.
But by no means does that make me delusional and make me think that I didn't have to work my butt off to get to where I'm at.
Yeah. Dude, I would kill to be out there with you guys. I'm in Detroit over here. There's not a powerhouse even, remotely comparable to you guys out here, I don't think.
Well, but the funny thing about that is that with the way the world is changing and the way the shift is occurring with the internet, like there's really no reason, because of the social media visibility and access points, there's really no reason that we can't have those collaborations.
That's right.
But you're right. It just makes it a little bit more difficult when you just don't walk in and you see those people and you're just like, all right, let's just have coffee and chat.
Yeah, if you're surrounded by that excellence all the time, you just kind of absorb it by proxy,
Well, I've heard of these other projects, and we've even worked on some of these things before as well. It's like you just have your coffee shop hour, right? So hey, just because you're in Detroit and I'm in San Francisco doesn't mean like once every month we just don't have our coffee shop hour. We just sit down and chat.
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing to manage, but man, I think the way the world is now, it's such an idea where you really now can make that connection with the broader community and feel like, hey, I'm still involved with San Francisco CrossFit, even though I have no idea, I've never met them really, but I'm still involved some way, shape, or form kind of thing.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, you're in San Francisco right now. I'm in Detroit right now, and we're having a conversation.
Yep.
But Roop, I know we don't have all the time in the world today, and I really want you to drop some knowledge bombs on me and anybody that's listening in regards to some technical stuff that I've seen going on with my clients and myself. The first thing that I kind of wanted just to get your insight on is single leg deadlifts and like an asymmetrical weight shift during single leg deadlifts. I assume this can be attributed to certain muscular imbalances, but I don't really know which ones. Especially for me, on my right leg, I've rolled that ankle, injured that ankle. My ankle's all tacked down. I have very limited mobility in that ankle, and I cannot do a single leg deadlift on that leg without shifting way over, even laterally, like off to the side of the leg. So
you're hanging on the outside of your ankle, more or less.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so it's an interesting conversation. I absolutely am infatuated right now with unilateral loading. A lot of the stuff that I do would not necessarily be seen classically in a CrossFit workout, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no harm in me also doing Cindy 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 air squats, all unilaterally loaded, right? So 5 pull-ups, one arm at a time, 5 single arm. I love unilateral loading, and the reason that is because I find that the body is meant to create rotation to resist rotation, right? So if you're somebody who knows biomechanically what the stable positions of the shoulder are, stable positions of the hips, then when you're squatting, we want to try to create that rotation. The one thing I will say is I've started to take a step back from this whole notion of, I want you to externally rotate your femurs. I want you to externally rotate your hips when you're squatting, push your knees out, as some would say. But there's nothing wrong with you also trying to let your knee go straight forward. Is it biomechanically probably the safest position for the joint? Probably not. But is it a movement that anatomically you should be able to do nonetheless? Sure. But what I care about is when you're doing that movement, whether or not you have the control to resist the natural rotation of the body to cave in. Right, your body's always going to look for stability, and whether you create that through muscular contraction or it finds it through hanging on your ligaments and putting your joints under stress is to be determined based on your strength.
Yeah.
What we find with a lot of athletes that have some of these issues with the single leg deadlift, as in your example, is 2 things. One, they truly have a limited ability to create rotation to resist rotation. So whether their hips are really tight or whether they just have a good range of motion in their hips that they have poor control over can be easily tested, right? You can easily have somebody sit in the bottom of the squat, and if they can sit in the bottom of the squat with their spine being neutral, or if they could do a stiff-legged deadlift and keep their spine neutral, you know that they have pretty decent hip flexion. And if that's the case, then I know that when they're doing a single leg deadlift, whether or not they can control that is less of a mobility issue from the hips perspective.
Let's see.
It's possibly more of a stability motor control thing. Now, that's not including the foot. If you can squat down to the bottom of your squat with your feet together and you have a neutral spine, knees are going forward or knees are going out, you have pretty good ankle mobility too, right? If I can squat with my feet wider and I sit straight down and I have a neutral spine, I'm kind of bypassing my ankles a little bit. But if I can squat with my feet completely together and my knees going forward, I have a lot of dorsiflexion as long as I can maintain a neutral spine. That tells me that you have pretty decent ankle mobility. Now, whether or not you have the stability and control around that is your ability to then load it up and move it in space. So it's that conundrum of being able to figure out quickly with somebody through whatever you want to call it. You can call it a movement screen or just watch them do a squat or a deadlift,
Yes.
and you can basically assess how much hip or ankle range of motion that they have or don't.
So those are the biggest players that you're looking at in regards to addressing that?
Nowadays, when it comes to mobility, here are my thoughts. The two biggest areas of the body that I focus on is the ankle and the thoracic spine. Those are the two areas that I focus on more than any other spot. Not because the other spots aren't more important, but I find that the thoracic spine, because of sedentary natures, poor posture, sitting mechanics, it becomes a very, very stiff, overly kyphotic structure that makes it's really hard to unwind and unglue. Not impossible, but takes a long time and patience. Probably where you'll make the biggest long-term change besides the ankle.
I see.
25% of the muscles in your body, 25% of the bones in your body exist below your ankles. So with that much tissue and structure going on down there, having poor ankle mobility, foot mobility, can be so detrimental. I can get you to open up your hips. I can probably even get you to do this, middle splits or straddle splits with decent ankles and let you bypass a lot of ankle mobility and be able to sit in the bottom of your squat in a relatively shoulder width position with no problem in your neutral spine, with no problem in your spine. We're talking about true human functionality and true human anatomy and physiology. I need those ankles, and the ankles was probably where you'll make the longest lasting change, but that will probably also take the longest time to make said change.
Yes.
And I find in the society we live in and the wears and tears that we put through our body, there's very few sports that really require full ranges of motion, and there's a huge propensity in our society to be very sedentary. Combine those two things in sitting, we end up destroying our ankles pretty quickly at an early age.
Yeah.
And those, whether it's because of sprains in sports, not going through full range of motion, can become very detrimental.
Yeah, I just recently made a video about how like traditional sneakers keep our feet in like plantar flexion all the time. That
if your shoe's not if your shoe's not a zero drop differential, meaning that the height discrepancy between the front of the foot and the back of the heel of the foot is not zero, you're wearing essentially some sort of high heel. If it's on the back end, there's even shoes that come out to kind of counterbalance that, where the front of the foot is actually higher up than the heel. So you're always stretching out your calves.
You're always in dorsiflexion.
You're always in a little bit of dorsiflexion. I forgot what the company was called. I think Earth something.
I gotta get some of those.
Yeah, and I don't think they did so well, and I think that's just because aesthetically speaking, they weren't the prettiest shoes.
No.
And truth be told, it goes aesthetics first before functionality with shoes.
Not to mention, for most people that are used to being in plantar flexion all the time, that would kill. That would be very uncomfortable.
It's no different than our society going from 6 millimeter shoes into trying to barefoot running. Like there's a strategic way you work your way self down there. You don't just rush into it. But it's the right idea. It just, I think you could be approaching it differently.
Okay. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I've talked to my friend, Dr. Ryan DeBell, about this quite a bit. He's a chiropractor.
Yep.
But we have both read, are you familiar with Shirley Sarman's book?
Yes.
Diagnosis and Treatment of Movement Impairment Syndromes?
Yeah, some of us are Sarman trained. Some of us have taken some Sarman courses. Sarman is very well prominent in a lot of the physical therapy community education system.
Great. Yeah, so I was just wondering, about the whole toes forward thing in consideration of congenital hip variances that people have.
Yeah.
Right? Like I saw on your Instagram, like you were squatting with your toes pointed out a little bit, and Kelly was in the video, and then he like made fun of you by totally externally rotating his legs. But shouldn't some people, isn't it just, ideal or optimal for them to squat with a slight external rotation?
Well, so that brings up a great question, or brings up a great conversation. First and foremost, at Mobility WOD, we always talk that biomechanically, between 0 and about 20 degrees of range of motion, perfectly safe and fine, perfectly strong, perfectly okay, right? So 20 degrees is that little bit of turnout that everyone keeps talking about, and everybody and a lot of people come to us, and this gets a little weird to me, gets a little confrontational about, hey, you guys keep saying straightforward. And we're like, no, we never said straightforward. We said between 0 and 20 degrees is okay. But let's talk about why we talk about straightforward.
Yes.
We talk about straightforward because of its transferability. Right? If I get you squatting with your feet forward-ish, right, then I know that when you go and play football, that when you go do a box jump, when you're out there trail running, you're controlling your hips on top of that forward position, whether you're trying to drive your knees forward, knees out, knees in, whatever. you have the stability and control of that position. If you're somebody who tends to squat with a 30, 40, 50, we've seen some gnarly turnouts in some of the squat positions.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who's squatting with a 45-degree turnout, and you're not, one, by externally rotating so much in the femur, you lose the capacity of creating as much external rotation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not able to activate the hips as much as you could otherwise, meaning that you're going to lose a little bit of power in that position.
Yeah.
More importantly, let's say you're somebody who lacks some internal rotation in your hip or a lot of internal rotation in your hip, which is a very common presentation. Mm-hmm. If I don't have much internal rotation in my hip and my knee wobbles the slightest, my likelihood of something tearing, rupturing, straining, an MCL, a meniscus, an ACL is very high. But if I'm somebody who squats and I have good internal rotation, good external rotation, and I know how to control that position with my feet forward, then I know that when I go out and play with my feet forward, that when I'm cutting, landing, jumping, running, that when I'm making those kind of volitional quick movements that in the moment I'm not going to be able to consciously think about, then the strains in the body are minimized.
Yes.
And your likelihood of controlling your hip is much better within about 0 to 20 degrees than it is if you're pigeon-footed or duck-footed and turned in or out everywhere. Mm-hmm. That minimizes your ability to really control that hip as well. And then when you're under unconscious efforts like playing basketball and you end up going up for a rebound, your knee caves in, there goes your ACL, those type of positional faults, we find that we can minimize by getting individuals to squat in a much better neutral position.
Yeah.
Now look, if I know that I have really stiff hips and I'm going to a powerlifting meet tomorrow and my goal is to get the bar pad straight up and down and I'm putting 1,300 pounds on the bar, you know what? Sure, maybe I can turn my feet out a little bit more. But we fortunately worked with some of the best powerlifters in the world, like your Donnie Thompsons, who's put 1,100, 1,200, 13 pounds on their back. And once you set their hip into the back of the socket, and even if they turn their feet out a little bit, they have much better control of the hip joint. Then mechanically, the stresses in the bodies are much better handled. Yeah. We find these individuals come arguing a lot about, hey, foot position, and 0 and 30 degrees, and you look at their hips and ankles, and they have zero range of motion in any which direction. So it's like, we can talk about foot position all day long, but if these guys have no range of motion in their hip joints and ankle joints, what are we freaking talking about?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I have retroverted hips, and so I've always attributed my lack of internal rotation in my hips to the retroversion, but I think a lot of it was just because of soft tissue restriction, because I watched your webinar the other day. And by the way, for those of you listening and those of you watching this, Roop puts out these. Are you still doing these webinars?
I've taken a break since I went on my Asia seminar tour trip, and the only reason that is because we're reconfiguring some of the setup associated with it. Okay. But I think the weekly webinar live mobility classes will be continuing in the near future. Okay. Pending my life is going to completely change in a few months having my first kid.
Oh, congratulations, man.
Yeah, so thank you.
That's exciting. But yeah, I mean, like Roop just said, they're live mobility classes that he puts on through Google Hangouts, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
And they're packed with information. But I was watching your groin pain one, and I was practicing the W sit.
Yeah.
And after doing some of the mobilizations in my hip, I actually was able to restore some range of motion in the internal rotation. And after doing that, I did some squats, and it felt amazing. I never addressed my internal rotation because I thought I was just doomed because I had this congenital,
Here's what that's a great conversation point. And you know what? I'll say this. We don't know what we don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And I can contend, I can argue, I can theorize that even though you have retroverted hips, that at some point in your youth, maybe the day you were born, you had pretty decent range of motion in your hips. You may have not had full internal rotation, and if your hips were retroverted 10 degrees, maybe that cost you 10 degrees of internal rotation. Yeah, but a healthy internal rotation could be up to 45 degrees. So where's the other 35 degrees?
Yeah.
Right? So what we have to do is understand this. If you have some catastrophic injury, if you have some neurological dysfunction like cerebral palsy or some sort of systemic issue that has cost you the control of these positions and the access to the position, sure. But if we're using those as just ballpark excuses and saying, hey, because you have retroverted hips, you're never going to go ahead and have internal rotation, we just leave it at that and not even try, that's where I have an issue. And my whole mindset is, look, I don't know how much internal rotation I can get out of you. And I don't necessarily believe that you are crazy enough to push yourself so hard that you're going to dislocate your hips. Right? When you're doing all this soft tissue work, when you're doing all these mobilizations, we give clear-cut instructions on what it means to be safe and what it means to be going too aggressive. And having that allows you to, mobilize safely and see changes and go for changes that, hey, we don't know we don't know what we don't know. So if, in 3 months you gain 0 internal rotation, hell, we tried our butts off. But we also know that the fascia takes 7 months to regenerate. The skeletal system takes 2 years to fully revamp itself. Give it a good year or two, and honestly, if in that time you see 0 change in your internal rotation, well, damn, we've tried everything we possibly could. But if we just sit there and kind of hodgepodge and say I do it once a week and I'm really trying to get good at my internal rotation but never really try, right? I should be able to squat with shoulder width apart and squat down and touch my knees together. Why not? I'm not going to do that with 100 pounds on my back and load in volume, but it's biomechanically and physiologically a movement that I should be able to do. It's not one that stabilizes the joint the best and produces the most power, but it's one that I physiologically should be able to do. And if you can't, hey, there's probably something internal rotation related to your hip missing. Yeah,
I was right in that camp that you said, like I said, I had never even worked on my internal rotation because I thought that there was nothing to be gained there. But then after doing your WSET test and retest, I realized that there was a significant amount of internal rotation that I actually...
Right, and now so you're realizing maybe there's more to be gained, maybe there's not, but you're starting to realize that you don't have to feel confined to somebody's statement saying you can't. And that's the biggest thing. It's like, I don't know. I'm not trying to dislocate your hip. I'm trying to just make you feel better, move better, and just overall live a happier, healthier life in your tissues. And if that's my goal, then I will try to feed you whatever I can to get you to at least commit to the journey and go for it. And if during that process we realize we can't make any change the way we'd hope to, we can redirect. But let's stop being so dogmatic and saying, no, just because you're retrograde, you can't even try to improve your internal rotation.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Roop. Very good. What were you saying about the 7 months to regenerate fascia?
Yeah, the way your fascia works is every day you use your body remaps itself. So if I use my body in a very specific way, let's say I sit at a desk with my back really rounded, and that body position, shape stays that way for months on end, your body is always looking for adaptation. Your body's looking to conserve energy. So if you move in a certain specific manner for a long period of time, your body realizes that, and therefore it becomes so normal and unconscious that your body winds your fascia and maps your tissues to that position. That's why the best mobilization for squatting is squatting. Right? So you want to get better mobility in your squat, keep squatting. Obviously, we want to try to do it with relatively good technique, but the more you do it, the more your body will wind to that. And usually research shows 7 months or so is what it takes to kind of re-layer down everything. It could be a little bit longer for some people, depending on the other inputs they give themselves throughout the day. But if you keep doing something over and over again, your body will re-layer down. And if you're somebody who sits, right, exactly. And if you're somebody who sits in a chair and your body is looking to conserve energy because that's what adaptation does, and you become rounded, your body's like, well, it's costing me way more energy to try to hold this position. Let me go ahead and tighten everything up around here, so this just becomes your passive position. And if we can teach you that can be undone, it can be undone.
I think I read that in anatomy trains that like people with like really bad kyphosis actually develop like new collagen like fibers are like laid down like on top of the kyphosis, and they develop like a hump of actual tissue back there.
It's no different than creating an arthritic ossification or calcification in your bones, right? You bang two bones against each other over and over again, or you pull on a tissue tendon away from a bone over and over again. Your body lays down more bone because there's enough stress and enough load into that area. The body's like, hey, I can't handle this for a long period of time, so let me go ahead and put extra bone there to make it a little bit firmer, harder. Once you do that, now you have all these weird muscle length tension relationship changes. Same thing happens to your fascia. You use it in a certain position over time, a certain way, your body just says, hey, if I just thicken this up to make it a little bit firmer, I can handle the day-to-day loads much easier. Then I don't have to worry about trying to like exert all my energy there. And then that's what we get, ridiculously overly kyphotic humpback individuals, which happens. But we can use that as an excuse in saying, hey, that's just who you are. That's who your genetics are. But we can also give you a mobility strategy and over time, due diligence and thinking about the other inputs you put your body through throughout the day. Hopefully make a change.
And you said that the data suggests that adaptation can be confined to like a 7 month time period.
The adaptation can't. What I can say is, from today, if I move in a certain manner, my body will remap my fascial tissues in that manner, and from 7 months from now, all the fascial tissue will have regenerate. All the fascia that you see in my body right now, 7 months from now, is brand new.
Yeah.
Right? How it lays down is dependent on how I move.
Yes. So you can use that for your advantage or your disadvantage.
Exactly, right? So if I sit here and say I'm going to mobilize for 2 hours and do a really good job doing it because I'm squatting really well, opening up my thoracic spine, and then I'm like, all right, cool, I'm going to go sit in my car for the next hour to commute down to Silicon Valley to type at my desk, and then that's for 6 hours.
Yes.
That 6 hour window is input, and that 2 hour window is input. All is input.
Yes.
How your body maps that is going to be dependent on how much input it gets.
That's a very simplistic way to look at things, and an awesome, like, very good way to look at things. I think provides a lot of insight, and that kind of ties into your quote, right? Pain is not inevitable. Position is power, and powerful positions are pain-free, right? It's like, if you spend time in these like weak positions, your body is, like you just said, now that I know it takes about 7 months, it's gonna remap itself to hold you in that position.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Here's the one thing I will say when it comes to the comment you made right there was like a weak position. When I'm trying to get my arms over my head, having my shoulders stuck forward is going to limit my capacity of getting my arms over my head. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. So opening that up is a better way of getting my arms over my head. That doesn't mean I want you to stand there for 7 months with your arms over your head to remap that. You should be able to fully internally rotate, fully externally rotate. You should be able to let your shoulders roll forward, shoulders roll backward.
Yes.
I care that you have, at every joint level of your body, all the physiological range and biomechanical range of motion that you should have. How we at Mobility WOD usually express that is through the archetypes of motion, these 7 shapes that you should be able to get your body into. But even more than that, I find at times, you should then also want to play with those shapes and start understanding what it is to have segmental control of your spine, be able to willingly internally rotate your hips and control that motion. Again, it's not something that I would necessarily do when I'm lifting weights, because that's a loaded position. But if I'm out there doing some capoeira, some breakdancing, some freestyle motion, you better believe I need to learn how to internally rotate so I can roll my body over my position. So right before this podcast, I jumped into Carl Paoli's weekly gymnastics class for the first half an hour. And we were just sitting there like, okay, squat down, roll to the balls of your feet, heels come off the ground. Then from there, kick one leg out. Wait a minute, that means I'm doing a pistol with my heel off the ground. Who cares? You should be able to sequentially load that and spin over that and still be safe. It's not something that I would do with a ton of load on my body, but biomechanically, healthy tissues can handle it.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about, like the trying to avoid all these like bad positions at all costs, is something that a lot of people, that when they first get into doing like mobility work, corrective exercise and things like that, that's a mistake that they'll make, right? It's like, I'm never going to internally rotate again because I need to stay in external rotation.
We always talk about having a neutral spine, but we also talk about taking a neutral spine and globally extending it, globally flexing it, and also how do you create segmental control of your spine? There's certain times that I would use all those shapes, but I hope you don't come into me one day and saying, hey, I have back pain, and because of what you guys put out there, I've never gone out of neutrality in my spine. I'm like, whoa, what? So you basically just walk around like a complete stick, just like turning in space without even letting your spine kind of. Yeah. That's gnarly. Like, that's not our interpretation. That's not what we want people to understand.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of actually movement practitioners that kind of advocate a dogmatic approach in which you would never like break what's considered an ideal position or alignment. And these people look like what you just said. They look like they're walking around like
and you know what? If that was the case, then we would never have Cirque du Soleil. We'd never have capoeira. We'd never have some of these. Now, don't get me wrong. Those individuals have very good control of their spine.
Yes.
But they all, on top of that fantastic mobility, it's not like they have this mobility and they're just hanging on their joints, hanging on their ligaments. Like, they have learned how to control those positions.
Yeah.
But they know the difference between that and then how to squat with 300 pounds on their back. Right? So you got to be able to kind of play with these positions. I know what neutral spine is when I have a 300 squat on my back. I know what neutral spine is when I'm trying to flow through a handstand push-up into a back bend. All these things are going to have localized control of the spine, but I have the mobility, hopefully, to control. I have the stability to control that mobility.
Yes.
If you come into me and you're like, I can't do a back bend because you guys said never get out of neutrality in your spine, I'm like, what? Then we've completely got lost in the conversation.
Yeah. I think that, like, in today's day and age, that's another thing that is commonly not looked at, like mobility without stability. Like, mobility without stability is a dangerous thing, right? You need to be able to control that new range of motion afforded to you by the whatever mobilizations you've been doing.
That's right.
In order to like not get hurt with it.
Yeah, and that's why at least in the CrossFit community, or at least at San Francisco CrossFit and most CrossFit communities, the best way to stabilize that is just go work out. Right? Yes. Use those shapes and use those positions. Now, there's not a lot of transverse movement sometimes in the CrossFit community, but you know what? Honestly, doing a pistol, you have to resist a lot of spinal rotation or a segmental rotation that occurs in the spine, the hip joint. So you are resisting a lot of that transverse, rotation. Now, that may be different than actually transversely moving through your body, sure. But we find that once you mobilize somebody and then you immediately teach them proper technique around that it's a quick translation in creating that stability around that. Not having to worry about hurting somebody because you gave them too much mobility. Yeah. I do find that the individuals that I ever work with that are the most difficult are the hypermobile athletes. They have no real end range control. So for them to be like, wait, what do you mean squeeze my triceps so my elbow doesn't extend? Like they have no, those are really hard individuals, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help people just have normal ranges of motion that they have physiological control over.
Do you find that a lot with yogis?
Some with yogis, some with gymnasts, but not all. Like gymnasts have certain areas of the body that they're really hypermobile, but that's usually for compensation for another area that they're really stiff in. So it can go both ways. It's rare when I find individuals that are complete whole body hypermobile. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, it's happened. But most individuals come in with certain hypermobilities in one area as a compensatory strategy because it's probably moved too much to compensate for another stiff area of their body.
Yes. Like the lumbar spine's relationship to the thoracic spine.
Yep. You find so many people that are so lumbar over mobile. I wouldn't even say hyper, but just excessively mobile because their upper backs just are rock hard.
For sure. All right, Roop, how much time do we have left?
A few minutes if you don't mind.
All right. I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
So I'm always trying to expand my knowledge. People that watch my YouTube channel, listen to this podcast, are doing the same. If you had to recommend somebody like 3 books on like therapeutic exercise or just movement in general, other than that lovely book behind you right now, Becoming a Supple Leopard, which I pretty much tell all my clients about that. It's on my website. I have affiliate links for you guys. But other than that book, do you have like 3 recommendations that you want to share with us?
I find 2 things. I find this question so hard to answer.
All right.
And I find that anytime I work with other individuals and ask this question, that I feel like, 1, such an asshole for asking it because the response is always the same, or 2, it's like I always feel like people are assholes because they never give me a straight response.
Yeah.
Because
Sorry.
I remember I remember this because I asked the same question to many people, and I have asked this question. I remember when I went to my L1 seminar that was taught by Adrian Bosman, who I worked with every day even before that. This question, he was like, "It doesn't matter. Like, just pick up a book and read." The problem with giving 3 recommendations is then you're going to become somebody who just wants to regurgitate what I'm talking about based on what I read from them, versus pick up anything. I'm a movement junkie. So certain days I'll be reading about your Kit Laughlins and your Ido Portals. Why? Because they really are talking about a lot of these flowy type of stuff, your MoveNet guys. Other days I'll go into the more of the cellular biology stuff. So I'll look at your Katie Bowmans. Other days I'll go very PT scientific related. So I'll look at your Sarmans and your Stuart McGillis. I do this, and this is my way of answering this, and I hope this is okay. Find a movement practice that stumps you. Capoeira, handstand bouncing, Cirque du Soleil, CrossFit, what else? Jiu-jitsu, MMA, yoga, Pilates. Find a movement practice that stumps you. And when you find that practice, and if you have a desire to learn about it, find the original creators of that practice or the original philosophers of that practice. Yeah. So when it comes to like yoga, I'll go back to like the Iyengar studios. When it goes to like the cellular level stuff, I'll go to your Katie Bowmans. When it comes to this crazy floreo type of stuff, I'll go to the capoeira community. Like, find some of the originators in the thinking of this stuff and just understand what they were trying to accomplish. What was their purpose when they came up with this style? Yeah. How do you then take that understanding and apply your philosophy on top of it? Or and do they mesh really well? Or is it just a totally different conversation and it's just more knowledge to feed into your trough? I will say for myself right now, the things that I'm listening to, reading to, I always enjoy, watching a lot of videos by like Kit Laughlin or Ido Portals. And those are the 2 prominent guys in my world. But that's just because I'm playing with a lot of holistic floreo type of like capoeira movements. I could have said 6 months ago, it was your cellular level stuff, your Katie Bowmans, and I just kind of, it depends on the mood I'm in that given moment.
No, I think you answered that was a much better answer than just listing off 3 books. How you just
Yeah.
like categorize those things. Yeah, no, that's great advice, man. Definitely. I just read Katie Bowman's book, Move Your DNA.
Yeah, Move Your DNA. Good book, right? Here's the thing. At the end of the day, we're all trying to solve the same problem. We want people to feel healthy and live a long, lasting life.
For sure.
We can compete all we want. We can talk about monetary gains. We can talk about popularity on Instagram. All I give a damn about is helping people.
Yes.
And if I get some financial reward, as long as I can spend for my family, I'm okay with that. I'm not somebody who's sitting here trying to be the richest man in the world by doing what I do, as much as I'm trying to feel like I'm the richest man because I help people.
Yes.
As long as I could do that, I'm very, very satisfied. If money comes with it, so be it. It doesn't define me.
That's great.
And I feel like in the society that we live in, sometimes that gets lost in space because everyone's trying to come up with the newest, greatest, latest product. I'm just trying to help people, man.
Yeah.
And I wish people would just take that on and be more forthright about that and just be like, look, we're here to help, whatever you need. And that's why I'm going through a shift right now, even in my Instagram account, where it's going to be more about, hey, what do you guys want to see? Because it's not about me and me being popular. Like, I'm going to do the videos and I'm going to be the one moving, and maybe I have other people in there. But what do you guys want to see? Because I sometimes don't want to be hidden behind the paywall of just pay me and I'll give you information. Let me feed you.
Yeah.
Let me see what I can do. And if it comes back and it doesn't help you, let's talk about why. Let's not argue about being an idiot.
That's awesome, man. I have the same perspective. Try to do the same thing with my students. But on that note, Roop, let's wrap this thing up. How can people get in contact with you? Where do you want everybody to go that's listening to this?
The best way to get a hold of me is just via email, Roop, R-O-O-P, at sanfranciscocrossfit.com. Other than that, you can follow me on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. My handle is usually at Roop Sihota, S-I-H-O-T-A, or Roop_Sihota, S-I-H-O-T-A. Find me anywhere there. If you leave me a message on any of those sites, I will try to do my best to get back to you. I'm much better at email than anything else, even though that gets a little delayed in response. So don't take that personally.
And where can people get access to those webinars that you did?
The webinars are some of them are still up in front of free for everybody to access on the Mobility WOD YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been pulled down on Mobility WOD's Pro Access account. And it really just it varies depending on the video and the content. Yeah. But I think those are my way of really giving back to a lot of people. So I really hope people understand why I'm doing those and not just me trying to be glamorous about me knowing everything, which I don't know crap anyways.
For sure. You know a lot, man. But yeah, everybody check those out. Those are... that's actually how I discovered Roop. They're excellent videos. Highly recommend you check those out. I think you have some links to those, or like a consolidated place where those links might be found, or like maybe on your Twitter or your Instagram.
Yeah, if you go to my Instagram account, like you'll see those links. They're not hyperlinks. They're not active hyperlinks, but you'll see them. Like just scroll through my Instagram account and you'll see like, hey, mobility video or mobility class of the week. Here's the topic and here's the link for it. Mobility WOD's YouTube channel. If you just click on the videos icon, I'm pretty sure the most recent ones will be up there. There's not a lot of great new videos out there on top of the ones that I put out, so they're pretty recently added in the last 6 months.
For sure. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll include all those links, Roop's email, San Francisco CrossFit's website, all the links that you just said in the description of the video. Other than that, thanks for coming on, Roop. I really enjoyed having you on here, man. That was I really like those conversations that we had. So
I appreciate it, man. You know my email. If you need to get a hold of me, chat, whatever, I'm always down to help.
Sweet. I'd love to have you back on here again sometime in the future.
Anytime, buddy.
Awesome. All right, Roop.
All right.
Have a good one, man.
Have a great day.